This is Ayani.
And this is Corinne.
And you're listening to Sex, Love, Literature, a pop culture podcast where we take a semi-scholarly look at why
and how
the sex stuff in media matters.
Joined once again by Dr. Yukai Chen, we dive right into last night at the Telegraph Club spoilers in part 2 of our discussion. We start with our feelings on Kath and Lily's relationship and the high-key stress of classroom makeouts.
From there, we consider the queer space of the Telegraph Club, Lily's complicated and not particularly likable bestie Shirley, as well as our thoughts on the admittedly fraught ending.
Did you also have a complicated reaction to how last night at the Telegraph Club ended? Let us know on Instagram and on Tumblr at SexLoveLitPodcast.
And don't forget to subscribe to and rate our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of your other favorite podcast platforms.
All right, let's get going.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to Sex, Love, Literature, your favorite podcast that is part academic and part chaotic. We are very excited to have you back for our second discussion on last night at the Telegraph Club. Our last episode was the spoiler-free version, which means that now we are going to be diving deep into spoilers about this fantastic book. I'll say it's fantastic, by Malinda Lo. We are excited to still be joined by our dear friend of the show, Kai. So glad to have you here. And
yay!
While we are pretty much going to get right into it, because we have a tendency to run long in the tooth, I guess, we're going to do a quick, rapid round of what's sparking joy. Corinne, do you want to do a rapid fire explanation of what sparking joy is, since I'm assuming they heard this from listening to part
rapid
one?
Fire, let's go.
So what's sparking joy is when we talk about something we are currently watching, reading, or listening to that is currently sparking joy for us. And when we want to be snappy about it, we normally talk about a song that we are currently listening to, often on repeat. So Kai, what is something that you are listening to right now?
Okay, so this is an artist I have been following for a while. Her name is Leon. She's a Swedish singer-songwriter. So in one of her songs called You and I started going back to this song, even though the album is a couple years old, because there's a new show on Hulu called English Teacher.
I heard about that.
Yeah, and one of the episodes, and I think it's the first episode, the ending is the song started to play. I was like, I know this song. How do I know this song? I need to find this song. And then I found it. It's You and I. And she just have this very textured, beautiful voice. And a song is always energized and emotional. So it's totally my vibe. So yeah, that has been on repeat for a while. She's my most listened to artist of 2023, so I'm not gonna be surprised if she gonna consecutively be take that place this year as well. So, what about you,
Corinne? You want to go?
Ayani, what about you?
Oh no, I'm getting called out by name.
Yeah,
Me. Okay.
Yes.
So for me, a song that I have on repeat right now is "Crazy" featuring Pink Pantheress by SSERAFIM. So it's funny because this song gets stuck in my head often, right? I'm always like an angel dressed like crazy, it's in my head. But I really like this version with Pink Pantheress, who I like a lot. I won't be surprised if she actually shows up on my top artists this year, though it's tough competition. It might be Beyonce, it might be Willow, it might be Hiatus Coyote. I don't know. We'll see.
Oh my God, Willow.
Yeah,
Willow.
Right? Oh, don't get me started on that album, because that will be the episode. But this song is lodged in my brain in a way that I don't appreciate. I'll be in the bathroom and I'll be like, oh, the girls are girling. It's stuck in my brain. So that's why it's on my frequently played list. But also SSERAFIM has an insane Instagram content creation team. They are all over my feed doing their little dances to this song. And I say little in that it's the bite-sized piece, not trying to
Yeah, it's like the TikTok clip.
Yeah, it's the TikTok clip. And they'll be like dancing in a stairwell. I don't know what this stairwell is. I don't know why they're always dancing in it, but like they're constantly on my feed. So this song is just
because
like,
there's always a fire drill. Like
there's
happening.
always right, it's like a fire dance drill, right? It's like, oh, the bell goes off, time to dance in the stairwell. So anyhow, Crazy by SSERAFIM is in my brain, and I think, Corinne, next time I see you, we're gonna have to like practice the dance. We'll have to figure it out. I've got the knee brush. I don't even like doing the dances like that, but dang it, the girls are girling. I have to learn it. So that's what's been sparking joy for me. What about you, Corinne?
So one of my top K-pop groups this year has been G-IDLE. G is in parentheses. And their EP that dropped in July has a lot of good tunes on it. And one that I've had on repeat is called Blume. I like it a lot. It's a very sort of like upbeat, like just sort of like poppy little piece. I really wanted to see G-IDLE when they came on tour to the United States. I think they might be here right now as we record, but they were not
actually singing that song as we speak. Like
maybe, but they were not in any locations I could easily get to. So I just need them to get more famous by the next time they come back, so that I can make it to one of their concerts.
Yeah, they were performing in Queens, like on a work day, and I was like, we could try to get to Queens, like. But yeah, it would have been a lot. So I'm sorry. Next time.
No.
NewJeans
and in the
concert
meantime, NewJeans also, like the other song I almost thought about mentioning that I guess I'll mention now is I think it's called How Sweet. Is that what it's called?
I think that's one of them. Yeah.
Yeah,
I really like the other one from that EP.
But they're I think NewJeans might be making the jump from exclusively like the sort of K-pop scene to more mainstream American music, because I was in like a restaurant not far from where I live, and it was clearly like an American pop list, and NewJeans was on there, so that was exciting.
Yeah, I have to say, like, I definitely see a lot of like American listener. Like, Ditto is one of my favorite songs from them. So, I just
say it a little.
In the middle.
So what I'm hearing is that they need to come to Madison Square Garden, and that we can all get tickets and go, is what I'm hearing. Or in Atlanta. I think.
Or we can meet in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Tickets are cheaper in Atlanta.
Yeah.
All right. You heard it first, NewJeans.
Yeah, they need to make it here while I still live here.
This is a threat, okay, NewJeans, Atlanta.
What we're threatening, I don't know, but
I don't know.
We'll be there. We'll be in the audience. So I was gonna say, can I just say that we're sparking joy for each other, and that's what's sparking joy right now, is like this group of people recording. But let's keep this vibe going as we head into our longer discussion of last night at the Telegraph Club. If you wanted some information about like characters and plot and all that kind of stuff, I highly recommend going back to listening to our first episode where we gave some of that kind of introductory information. We will give a little bit of context for folks as we speak about them, but if you needed that kind of like groundwork setting, you'll definitely want to go listen to episode 1, which I will link to in the show notes. But to start our discussion, why don't we think a bit about the main relationship, about Lily, her burgeoning feelings, and her buddy Kath, who they're math nerds together in school.
Her buddy.
Well, they were buddies first. This was a friends to lovers, okay?
Yeah. I love that both women in STEM, like trying to, like one is like super fascinated by, I think like just space in general, right? And Kath, that's Lily, and Kath is want to be a pilot one day, which is like, that's initial. Just I'm like, yay, good for you.
Yeah, it was actually kind of endearing because one of the things that Kath said is that because she was a girl, people were like, oh, you can't be a pilot. Women don't fly. So they were both kind of like thinking about these, I'll say at the time, but probably also still now, very male dominated fields that they wanted to be involved in. But I don't know, it felt like their dreams, while people told them the quote unquote realities of the situation, they didn't let that get in the way of the things that they were dreaming about and wanting to be a part of, you know?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Like, okay, so I use this book a lot to introduce or really sort of highlight the concept of intersectionality for my students. So for readers, or not readers, for listeners, and I guess also readers of the book who may not be familiar with what we mean by intersectionality, it's a term that is used to indicate the way that people can experience interlocking systems of oppression that are different than those systems functioning on their own. But one of the interlocking systems of oppression that Lily experiences is good old-fashioned sexism. And part of the way that like manifests is because like Lily at school like wants to go to college, is one of two girls, Kath is the other one, in math still their senior year. And that is like an experience that the two of them really had like in common and like as something that they shared.
Do you think it'll be useful to link the Capshaw article in the show notes about intersectionality?
If you want to.
Okay.
I don't know how academic we want to get, but yeah, sure.
I'll put it there. If they want to read it, they can read it.
Yeah, like in terms of like, because I feel like novel is such a great space to explore intersectionality in the sense that like it's not just like slapping on identity onto you, right? But like in narratively it really tells like what's like to live in this multiple systems simultaneously and feeling the kind of the weight. So yeah, and I want to say like the also like on top of that, it's like the being a good Chinese girl, right? Like that's something that constantly coming. The good Chinese girl, what does it mean for Lily? Because she's point of view. So we don't know much about Kath, like in their dialogue, but still, like it's rich in a very saddening way. It's the interdialogue,
That was actually something I thought was interesting, and I'd be curious to hear y'all's opinion on this, right? But like, not to put too fine a point on it, but this is an interracial relationship, right? Kath is, what is she Italian American, if I remember correctly?
I think so.
Yeah, so a lot of the book is thinking about Lily's relationship to her identity as a Chinese American, right? As Kai was saying, like being the good Chinese girl. And I think in some ways there is, and it doesn't feel like super heavy-handed discussion, but like the way she would talk about things that like Kath might not understand. Some of I'm trying to think of a moment particularly from the book, but I feel like there were moments where they were talking about their different home situations and how Lily would think in her monologue, oh, well, this is something that Kath won't necessarily understand. So I guess that was another one of those subtle ways that the book is thinking a lot about like identity in a way that was useful. Right? It wasn't necessarily saying like, oh, Kath doesn't get it, so I'm not going to talk to her about it, but more in a way that like there was definitely an awareness in Lily of perhaps how she was viewed not only by her community, but kind of like society at a larger stake, you know?
And I think this kind of feeling of isolation is not just, and it's very authentic to their age, right? I remember being at 14. I don't talk to people about like how I feel. Like I just feel them and feel like there's no one would understand, right? So like the like sometimes very kind of complicated relationship unfolding inside of them internally is it's like I can relate to that as the like middle school, like don't know what's going on. And
I don't want to think about middle school, but yeah, you're absolutely right.
I think another aspect of it that's really interesting to me is Lily and Kath's sort of like different relationships to their own queerness, because Lily doesn't know that she's, or hasn't quite realized that she likes women at first, but Kath like has kind of already had this journey of discovery, but they also like can't fully communicate about it because like it's not safe to just be like, oh yeah, I'm a lesbian.
Right.
Like they can't just like be out because like it's not safe at school. It's not safe in like larger society. There's many ways in which like it is not safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they both like, I don't know, like Lily kind of like gets the sense maybe that Kath is that way, but like it takes a while for them to trust each other enough to be able to like say it or like act on it.
Yeah.
Or like even have the words for it exactly.
You know, it's funny because one of the things we mentioned in the last episode is that the kind of opening or the larger kind of half of the novel, the front half of the novel, I should say, feels like it takes a little bit longer, right? And that might be because so much of it is them trying to figure out how to talk to each other about this thing that they share, that they don't know that they share quite yet, before we get to the motion of before the Telegraph Club even gets introduced, right? They have to kind of, I mean, Lily has to work up the confidence enough to even start to have this conversation with Kath. And I wonder if that's why maybe that kind of first portion feels a little bit slow, is because we're doing a lot of waiting and a lot of figuring out and a lot of like, can I talk to her? I don't know. We're in the bathroom together. I dropped my clipping of Tommy from my notebook. Can I, so it's a lot of that.
Well, it's kind of like this book is two things, because one of the critiques of a lot of like 2010, maybe like 2000s queer YA was that it was just coming out stories. It didn't actually involve relationships or like sexual relationships. So kind of in this book, we are getting both Lily's like at least internal coming out narrative plus a romance.
Yeah.
So like this book is doing, and it's not like that clear cut between one and the other, but it is trying to accomplish those two goals, or like those two storylines as part of the narrative.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the kind of slow pacing is also to do with like how Lily have to be very tactical about the way she goes about things, both within the family, also later in school.
Yeah.
So those are you kind of rush those, especially like for a teenage girl. If you just have such tactical mind and have those things mapped out, it will be kind of uncanny. So yeah, I think those complex and like very anxiety laden kind of
lots of anxiety
like pages, really, like Corinne said, is both coming out first to herself, and then how can she like communicate with and Kath in a safe way. So even though like the first half of the book might feel a little slower, to me it's well deserved to have that, give the respect to the characters, to let them figure it out like for themselves.
Oh sure, for sure. Well, let me ask a question then, because I think we're talking a lot about kind of how their relationship was unfolding for us, thinking about the pacing and things like that. But I would be curious for y'all, what was one of your favorite moments of Lily and Kath together? Either like before they figured things out, while after they were like, oh, I'm in love with this girl. Like what was your favorite Lily and Kath moment from the book?
I mean, the one that I think of, okay, my answer is shaped by having taught this book twice in a class that was specifically about sex in young adult literature. Like the first scene I think about is when they like have sex in the classroom. I don't even know if that's my favorite moment, but that's like the one that I think about.
So, okay, I'm gonna save you here and ask, is this something that your students have talked about a lot? Like, is this one that stood out to them and that's why it's on the top of your brain?
Well, it's because I make them talk about it.
Why? Come on, give us the pedagogy here. Why do you make them talk about this?
So in the context of the class, we like actually do close read a lot of the sex scenes in YA to be like, okay, like how explicit is this? How much could you get about like what goes where, when, and like what is, and most of the time it is very, very hand wavy. So even in a book like Forever by Judy Blume, which is like sort of critiqued as being like overly didactic, even in like its depiction of sex, it is still like pretty, like my students generally agree that like you could not actually learn how to have sex from reading this. And I think that last night at the Telegraph Club, I think that when Kath and Lily like do like have sex, like it's interesting in how it is thinking about what sex between two women looks like, how places where it is more explicit, places where it isn't, things that are like sort of implied versus things that are stated. And in a way, a question that I ask them a lot is like, is this sex scene sexy? And they generally consider this one to be sexy. But that is in part because of the ways in which Lo is not using like super explicit terms.
Right.
But also like, okay, I'm going to stop talking about it now. I don't need to close read this sex scene in my brain anymore. But that is the first one I think about now, just because of the way I've taught this book. I will not be making my students now close read it for my banned books class. They don't have the practice at doing that.
Oh, yeah.
With other books.
It's funny because thinking about that sequence, well, that's one that really stressed me out because I was like, the classroom, they're in the classroom. Someone's going to see them. But also it's funny, I guess I wasn't thinking of it as like full-on sex because...
Well, what counts?
Well, it's not that I don't think it doesn't count. It's not that I...
That is a question I ask my students.
No, yeah. And it's not that I don't think it doesn't count, but I guess in my head I was like, it's hand stuff. Which
it was not just hand stuff.
But you're right. No, it wasn't just hand stuff. There was some leg stuff involved too. So I don't know. I guess I think I was also being an old lady and was being like, oh, the youths, they're fooling around in the classroom. But we can stop close reading this in our brains right now. And Kai, what was your favorite? What was your favorite Lily and Kath moment?
That classroom thing was definitely, when I was reading it, I was like, oh my god, it's a shame. Like to do it in the classroom. It's not about the act itself. It's the location.
It's the classroom. It stressed me out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, okay, so I do think that is really interesting, and then I'll let you talk about your favorite moment in a second, Kai. But like thinking about like how few options Lily and Kath have of safe places to be together because they don't have, like, they can't go home. There's only so much they can do in the like semi-public space of the Telegraph Club. Like, where else can they go as teenagers without their own homes?
You know, I 100% hear you.
Yeah, absolutely. So like a lot of like gay urban geography is study like why the public space is the most private for queer people, just because like the availability and safety sometimes is like there's exists nothing else but like the most obvious, like most quote unquote taboo places. But you know, I'm a teacher still, so not in my classroom. With all the intellectual background, I'm still like, not in the classroom.
It's funny because to me, I went straight like thinking back to high school and what I know went down in stairwells, but also I know teachers patrol the stairwells and I know people get caught doing things in the stairwells. So I was just having that kind of panic of knowing, as an adult, like the teachers right around the classroom, they're looking for the students being naughty in the hallways, right? But so I think I was kind of bringing that energy to it, that like I was so worried that they were going to get caught, and what getting caught for them meant was so much bigger perhaps than what it meant. I mean, granted, things were still weird in the early 2000s, right? But like still, you know what I mean? What it meant for them to get caught in the 1950s, like, was just so nerve-wracking to me. So, yeah, I think it's really interesting, like, thinking of the different ways that the space of the classroom can take on all of these different layers of meaning, right? From, do they have anywhere else that's safe, to, like, as teachers, are we like, oh, the classroom? But then also, you know, the public space of it all. But Kai, please tell us, what is your favorite Lee Cassie?
Yeah, my favorite moment is also in the classroom, but not that one. It's like when they started it's actually when they first notice each other. Because
Mm-hmm.
it's so not about, oh my god, this girl just looks so beautiful. It's not
Mm-hmm.
about that. It's when they realize, oh, this girl has aspiration, like this girl
Yeah.
has
Mhm.
dreams. Like that's a moment, and then they started noticing each other. Well, I
Yeah.
believe Cass mentioned that. I started noticing you when I see your eyelashes. I'm like, oh, that's cute. But like
Mm-hmm.
the moment when they kind of mutually connect is through the conversation that
Mhm.
that kind of to me it's like, okay, this is going to be healthy in a lot of more
Yeah.
ways than
Yeah.
just like physical attraction, right? So
Mm.
that's very cute to me. Yeah, I think that's the biggest moment, like if I'm thinking about it.
It's funny because mine is similar to yours. The one
Yeah.
that jumped to mind for me was when they were in the park on the blanket talking about their
Oh yeah.
dreams and then their hands
Mm.
touched. I was like, oh, the babies. their hands are touching in the park. But I think a lot about that scene. It was very sweet and innocent and kind of like this not idealized, but idyllic kind of vision of young love,
Mm.
right? You know, the sun was shining, they're sharing their dreams and goals with each other. That first time that you brush up against somebody that you have a crush on, like all of it was very much like the sweet stuff about youth romance that I can really appreciate,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So that's one that I kind of kept coming back to, that was really like a precious moment in their relationship. Also, the first time they kissed, I think was really well written as well. Because I
Mhm.
think it can, I don't want to say it can be difficult, but I think like you, a kiss can be described really badly. And I think Lo just did a good
Yeah.
job of talking through what that experience was like for Lily in a way that I was like, oh yeah, that is what a first kiss can be like. Like, you know, so
Mm.
I think those are the moments for me that come up. So, since we kind of spent a bit of time talking about the space of the classroom, both as a place of like the first spark of their friendship, but also as this kind of big moment for them in their relationship, this might be a good time to think a little bit about spaces. And in particular, one of the titular spaces, the Telegraph Club, right? So, for a super little bit of context, the Telegraph Club is one of the, I guess, one of the gay bars in town.
Well, specifically a lesbian bar.
Yes, there are a couple that are mentioned over the course of the text,
Yeah.
but the Telegraph Club is the only one we actually go to. And part of the draw of the Telegraph Club is that there is a singer, Tommy Andrews, who I guess we could say is at the time would have been called a male impersonator, right? She
Mhm.
dresses up kind of in a suit, slicks her hair back, has a certain kind of swagger that she takes on for the show. And at the start of the evening at the Telegraph Club, there's a little bit of everybody in there. There's like couples, or I should say, there are straight couples in the back who are there, I don't know, to gawk, but also I feel like the women were hot for Tommy. So like I think the men were
Kind of as like
gawking, but
tourists.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's touristy, but also some of those women were really into it. So like, you know, touristy, but maybe also opening some doors for some people to learn about
Mhm.
themselves. But then as the night goes on, the tourists kind of filter out and it becomes kind of this really sapphic space as Tommy does her
Mm.
second set. So, what do we think about the Telegraph Club? What are some of the things that jumped out to you? What are some of the things that you want us to kind of talk about here?
So the Telegraph Club is an interesting space. So Kath has been before, and when she accidentally comes across Lily's ad that she's cut out for Tommy Andrews performing, is like, "Oh, I've been. Like, do you want to go?"
Mm,
So that's how Lily ends up at the Telegraph Club for the first time, and it becomes like this thing that Lily and Kath do. And I think the Telegraph Club is interesting because it is sort of like a safe space for queer women, or as
mm,
much as there can be a safe space for queer women in this time
mm-hmm,
period, but that doesn't necessarily mean it is fully a safe space for Lily and Kath. And one of
mm-hmm.
the reasons that I think that is the case is because they are so young,
Yeah.
but like they don't have any other places they can go to like sort of like explore their queer identities.
Mm-hmm.
So it is both this I guess it's a dialectic in which it is both safe and not safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do have to get fake IDs in order to get into the Telegraph Club. So Kath already has a fake ID, and part of the way that they get closer to each other is that she gets one for Lily as well.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's a really a space of both like intensification about like a lot of like the contradiction like happening internally for Lily, as well as a space of like force her to confront, right? Like, what does it mean to have these desires? What does it mean for a Chinese girl to have these desires? Or like, what is it like? I know Korean also want to talk about like being the only like Asian in that space too. So because like I for some reason, I think because the school is very close to Chinatown, so like there's no like lack of Asian like students in like Lily's middle school. You're right, but in the club, so like she never really think about like me being like Chinese woman until like she gets into the club, and even the women there call her a China doll, and then that's where she started to confront like, okay, like me being Chinese and also having these sapphic desires. So, and to me, it's also I don't know. I haven't like fully kind of flashed out this idea, but to me, it's also impose a space of a danger, just like for Lily, because like, you know, like even though they entered with the pretenses of having a fake ID, like immediately they just start drinking, and like and the girls start buying them drinks, like right from beer to stronger liquor,
right?
And it's a process that while I was reading, I was uncomfortable, and and I think Lily herself is uncomfortable, but the other woman, of course, they really kind of through the raid like suffered tremendous consequences, especially on the newspaper. But I don't think that that's like the most productive way of addressing the tension here, like just by like publicly like shaming them, right? Because for Lily, it is there's a lot of valuable kind of exploration in these through these experiences and through this discomfort. But to me, I just like, are there other ways, right? Are there other ways? But the reality is in 1950s, not really. Not really. You know,
it's funny there. So really quick on the drinking, because I think that was also something that made me uncomfortable. And it wasn't necessarily the fact that they were drinking, but the fact that I think it was older women that were plying. I don't want to say plying because it wasn't like they were doing this like maliciously, but maybe it was kind of the fact that everyone else here was more experienced and they didn't, I don't know, but even Kath didn't feel uncomfortable drinking. Like it was something that she had done before. And I guess it makes me think a bit about my own like experiences with alcohol and how like the first time I had a drink, I was 16, but I was like at home on Thanksgiving. And I say the first time I had a drink, let's say the first time I had like a real drink that someone was like, here, have this beverage. Not like I'm trying beer and it's gross. But also like I was going into, I don't know, because I was young, but like not that young. So it's not the fact that they're drinking that makes me uncomfortable, right? Because teenagers get their hands on alcohol, and this is not me being like kids should drink, right? But I think it's more the way that Lily perhaps felt like she had to drink in order to fit in. That was uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But Kai, something I wanted you to like speak on a little bit more is you mentioned the Telegraph Club functioning as a space of intensification for Lily. And I was wondering if you could like build on that a little bit more, because it sounds super interesting.
Yeah. So it's like, for example, like in the book, besides the internal exploration like Liz having about herself, like sometimes she will see women walking in pairs on the street and it would be like,
Yeah.
oh, what's their relationships like, right? And there's she started noticing the way they dress, the way they interact with each other. But like in a Telegraph Club, it is where she started to socialize in the very kind of identity that is associated with like, oh, this is how women who I can identify with dress, smell like. There's a lot of emphasis on the smell from Tommy, and then like and how they like their mannerism, right? So this is like outside of Telegraph Club, this is just it's just a glimpse of like what potentially what can be. But like once they step into Telegraph Club, this is it. Like this is what can possibly be. So this is a very kind of intensified kind of feeling, and also like from this is for her sexuality, right? But like previously I talked about like also intensification of her otherness, right? Because first of all, she's unsure about like her own feeling, like right? So she's still a baby bird trying to learn to fly, and like, but then she's like, oh, okay, I am a cardinal in a group amongst a group of peacock. I'm trying to think about birds, right? So like this otherness that is layered, like internally also start to kind of intensify as well. That's why like I do kind of, because you know my own identity becomes so like so frustratingly kind of at the frontier of my social interaction whenever I walk into a queer space as well, right? And it is slow. It might change geographically because, you know, it depends on the local population. But sometimes, like, I would be the only Asian person in the space. Like sometimes something that I would not notice or become aware until I step into the enclosed space where I feel like I belong. So the intensification also is like the belonging to a queer space and the otherness of the racial identity start to have this, these two things are separate for me. Like I cannot just just because I belong here in one way, I will stand out in another. So that's another intensification I'm talking about.
No, that's super useful and super helpful. I mean, like, well, one, I know we talked a lot in the previous episode about kind of intersectionality, and we talked about that a bit here too, but it's almost like the Telegraph Club acts as a space for putting a magnifying glass on that, right? And the ways the different parts of her identity intersect. But also I'm loving the way that you're highlighting like the way her senses are almost intensified, because the first time we quote unquote meet Tommy, she's a cutout from a newspaper, right? So the image is blurry, right? It's an image. There's no sound, there's no smell, there's no nothing, right? But when we get to the Telegraph Club, suddenly she's a moving, breathing person. So we get like the smell of her cologne and the way she moves across the stage and the sound of her voice. So like Lo is using all of these different senses to really like show how intense the experience is for Lily. I really like this book.
Yeah, kind of. I think maybe to think about another space, and we can keep talking about the Telegraph Club if we want to, but I think it is also interesting to think about how Lily fits into Chinatown, or feels that she fits into Chinatown, that like that is initially when the book starts a place where she feels like, you know, safe and at home and like she fits. And she's very aware, like as she walks to school, of like the various neighborhoods and like when she leaves Chinatown and like what that feels like. But like as she becomes increasingly queer, and especially after she's outed, it's like she becomes alienated from Chinatown in a way.
It's interesting because we start this text with Chinatown, as you're saying, being this home safe space, but there's like this through line of surveillance that comes up and comes back. So ultimately she's outed by someone from within her own community, right? That, you know, it is the surveillance of the home space that is safe as long as you conform in a way.
Yeah. That's a good way
it
to
really
put it.
reminds me of the Crazy Rich Asian. There's one scene where the two are just being spotted in a restaurant, and the internal network immediately started like the clock starts turning, and his mom in Singapore just okay, my son is seeing this woman now. This is how like a very tight knit kind of communities are work, right? And I feel like it's so. Because I think the theme for the Chinatown is like they are trying to, especially under the Red Scare at that time, is how to prove their Americanness, right? Yeah. So like they want to be in San Francisco as a Chinatown, but most of all, they are American. So like I don't think any other space like in Chinatown, especially through Shirley, like as a character we don't really talk about. She is so want to become this good American girl, and be the bridge between China, like the Chinatown and the American society, right? And for Lily, and she's like, no, I don't think I can do either. Almost just because of who she is. Like, so this home base, this Alamo, like from at the beginning become slowly more hostile, I would say. And for her.
I'm actually really glad that you brought up Shirley. So just for some context, Corinne, I'm taking your job. Look at me giving context. But Shirley is Lily's bestie, and they have been friends since they were itty bitty little things, right? And one of the storylines that is kind of the through line for last night at the Telegraph Club is Lily realizing that maybe Shirley is not actually the best friend for her. And ultimately their relationship dissolves for a variety of reasons, including Shirley being a little bit of a bitch. But
Shirley is a Regina George, like here.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. She's a Regina George. Absolutely. But one of the things that's really interesting about Shirley is that she enters, it's the New Year's, is it New Year's celebration with the Miss Chinatown?
Oh, yeah.
That was New Year's, right?
Chinese New Year. Yeah.
They have a pageant to vote for Miss Chinatown, who gets to be kind of like the representative. And Shirley is going to be running in this year's Miss Chinatown competition. And I think for a book that is thinking so much about like what it means to be a woman and that kind of turning point from quote unquote girlhood to quote unquote womanhood, it is such an interesting kind of linchpin of the different kinds of women that Shirley and Lily want to be, right? Because Lily wants to go to college. She wants to do all these mathy and spacey things. And Shirley is kind of like, why don't you just date the cute boy that we've known forever? I don't quite understand why you want all of these things. And this is, it's just kind of like an interesting dichotomy of a conversation about womanhood that I think is happening in the 1950s.
Well, and something that is also interesting there between Lily and Shirley that Lily maybe isn't always aware of is how much more economic privilege she has than Shirley. Because like Lily's dad is a doctor and her mom is also like pretty educated. She's a nurse, right? I think.
Sure.
I don't, but she's like,
we'll go with that.
she has further education past high school.
Right.
Whereas like Shirley's family owns a restaurant and it's a pretty successful restaurant, but Shirley also has a lot of siblings and Shirley maybe couldn't go to college if she wanted to. So social class there is also a thing, I think, there in the subtext of their relationship and why Shirley maybe has some of this resentment towards Lily even before she finds out that Lily is queer.
Yeah. Though I will say the sense that I got, because it's not like Lily lives in a very, very fancy apartment, right? I always kind of viewed their space as a little cramped, right?
Yeah.
And filled with people. Whereas for Shirley, when we talked about her home, we're talking a lot about spaces, which I think is interesting. This isn't something I foresaw when we started doing this episode. But with Lily's home over the restaurant, even though there's like the constant smell of food, it gave me a little bit of like nouveau riche. There's a lot of like different kinds of furniture that comes together. It didn't feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I could just be making up my own version of Shirley's home, but like it's not like the furniture was pulled off the side of the road. Like it's good furniture. They've got knickknacks everywhere.
I think it's a little bit of like a blue collar, white collar division.
Okay.
Between like Shirley and Lily.
Because it didn't feel so much like a money thing. But I think it maybe like, even if their parents are making the same amount of money, you think it's like, I'm putting huge quotes around this because I think all labor is skilled, but like skilled labor versus like service labor kind of a thing.
I really think like this is where like Lo kind of is trying to show like the different channels of immigration into US can look like, right? Because just going back to Lily's family, Joseph, her dad, was sponsored by one of the church things.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, in China. Then I met her mom somewhere. I really love the way they met each other, by the way. And then she has this Aunt Judy, who's like a very established scientist, like extremely intellectual, like so this is a very common way of like immigration, right? But there's also like the ways through which like it is through manual labor where like people got immigrated here. So like this is most likely like the family business kind of oriented so which is like this is a division between Lily and Shirley that I'm looking at, and they're like also because of this kind of division, so like the aunt Judy would never exist in Shirley's family. So like it would be impossible for Lily to have someone who are not like, yes, you go girl, but is like, okay, let's take step like de-escalate and let's figure things out like from the end, like Judy's perspective, right? So I this setup is, I feel like, very intentional to allow like this like the hope that like towards the end of the book to be possible. I feel like.
Aunt Judy plays a really important role, I think, in making it so, like you're saying, Kai, that there's hope at the end. But before we go to Aunt Judy and the end of the book, which I absolutely think we need to talk about, I wanted to loop back just really quickly to Shirley, because she was such an important relationship for Lily throughout the book. And there's this push and pull between the two of them, especially when Lily starts hanging out with Kath. Shirley, I think, gets kind of jealous that there's someone else that is getting Lily's attention and affection. And ultimately, they end up with this kind of huge friend breakup because Shirley finds out that Lily has been at the Telegraph Club and is like, I can't be around you anymore. I'm, I don't know. She tries to quote unquote save her from herself. And Lily's like, I can't lie about who I am. I can't do that. And Shirley's like, well, then I can't be around you. But I just was curious because, I didn't really like Shirley, but I would just be curious to hear what you all kind of like think about the way that relationship fell apart or it worked. I guess the reason I keep coming back to it is that I am always very cautious of people who just need yes men around them, right? Who cannot take challenges to how they do things from people that they care about. And in a lot of ways, it felt like Shirley was keeping Lily as a pet rather than as a friend. And that kind of really rubbed me the wrong way. But I'd be curious to hear what y'all think.
I mean, I mostly agree with you. And I would say most of my students would also agree with you. But I do think a book from Shirley's perspective would also be interesting because of how she is accidentally gets more plugged into like a group of young Chinese people who get sort of tagged by the US government as communist sympathizers, which is not you know, super smart of Shirley necessarily, because, you know, she does it for her boy.
Mhm.
But I think that's a way in which Lois sort of like alludes to the ways in which that is also happening at the time and is sort of coloring the many sources of danger and precarity for Lily in being both Chinese and queer at this time period without necessarily having to put too fine a point on it.
Yeah. I do feel okay. How do I put it more delicately? I'm not saying like Lily, Shirley is like my favorite character. She's not. I actually don't really much like her. But she's also like the confrontation happened between Lily and Shirley. If you remember, Lily's also trying to save Shirley.
Yeah.
Like confronted her for keep seeing. I forgot what his
Calvin?
name.
That sounds familiar.
I was thinking about like Kevin or something like that.
Yeah, it's like a Kevin somewhere in there.
Yeah. But
some guy.
Yeah, just some guy, and it turns out to be like this very ugly and unnecessarily fallout that is like, oh, you are holding this against me, now I'm holding this against you, so I guess there's no way for us to reconcile in any possible ways. So I feel like I want to give Shirley a little bit credit for, she is a very like, even though she want to be this like, you know, married wife kind of figure eventually, but like more leaning toward domesticity, but she is also someone who is like kind of have given thoughts about her place in the world as a Chinese woman. Like she is not like just she, like, especially through the way she want to deliver her speech, even though she knows the speech doesn't matter anymore at that point, is like, I'm not gonna call her a victim, but she is a product of the time frame that she could not really struggle out of.
Yeah, I wonder what a Shirley would look like in 2024. You know what I mean? What this kind of character could be if she was a little less constrained by like the time period she was in. Because she also, I mean, was someone who was looking to escape from Chinatown, right? They went on that rainy day adventure where they just rode the train as far as it could go, right?
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right that she's thought a lot about her position and what it means to be kind of like a Chinese American woman in this day and age. You know, she's just not very nice. That's all.
Yeah, I think all of that can be true at the same time.
Yeah. I feel like none of these characters are unaware of the intersectionality of their experience. I think like almost everyone in like Lily and her family and Shirley, like they are all struggling to like reconcile. But like for Lily, of course, there's even more kind of obstacles or just like needles to work with here.
So actually, really quick, since we brought up her family, I just want to point to Lily's mom, Grace, who I thought was so interesting. And when Lily and her mom have the discussion about the fact that Lily was at the Telegraph Club and that, you know, she likes girls, and she's not going to lie about who she is. That sequence was so heartbreaking to me because I felt like I knew it was coming this whole book. And also that it's 1954 and that her mom's not going to be like, oh, baby girl, I already knew that. And I love and respect you for who you are. I knew it wasn't going to be like that. So it made me really sad that it happened the way that it did. And I don't know. Her mother is such a complicated figure, I think, right? Because she obviously still loves Lily, but can't wrap her brain around this version of her daughter being so very different from the version that she, I guess, built up in her brain or thought that she knew, you know?
Well, and a layer of it, particularly because of the setting, like Grace knows that like if Lily, I don't know, I guess it does this or chooses this or however Grace is thinking about it, it is an unsafe choice.
Yeah.
Like it will put Lily in more danger in many concrete ways.
Yeah.
So it is both Grace not recognizing her daughter, but also being like really concerned about her safety.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really like Annie said, like it's a moment of disillusion, like just because I was like, oh, will there be something that is gonna be different? Like, but eventually you are like, no, it's just no. This is always gonna what's be like for a Chinese family in 1950s. Like it's me who is kind of delusional to think like, oh, it's gonna be a happy ending, but one thing that I really kind of really saddened me is like after the conversation, the confrontation between Lily and her mom, as well as like the runaway situation.
Oh God, yeah.
And then, but she still had to go back home for the Chinese New Year.
Yeah.
It's like it's to me like just reading it, it's very out of body and kind of experience, right? So what's your experience reading that segment?
Yeah, that was intense. So this is the part of the book that really felt like it was like rapid fire to me. From her running away to her staying with Lana for a couple days, finding out that Tommy was in jail, not knowing what was going on with Kath, and then she has to go back to her family. And one of the things that I thought was really expertly done that Lo did was talking about this like bifurcation of her mindset, that like the Lily that was sitting at the table peeling vegetables or chopping chestnuts was different from the Lily that was like narrating to us or was in her brain. And it was just, I don't know, it was such a visceral and kind of painful experience to read, right? That I think really, really resonated, you know, especially kind of like with some of the conversation we've been having about how hyper aware Lily becomes of these spaces where she is trying to be her full self, but a part of her is, you know, always stands out. And this is kind of it's almost like the opposite, where now she is trying to live and be her full self, but she has to now suppress. It's like an interesting kind of, I don't know, like a conversation with her existence in the Telegraph Club, right? But no, it was just, it was a lot. I knew, it's like, in a way, I knew some of the things were coming, but I did not foresee how hard that sequence would be, right? Yeah.
So something that I really like about the end of the book is actually, I think, the way that Lo is balancing realism with hope, because there is like this realisticness of the way that her family likely would react, and you know that like the Telegraph Club can't just go on peacefully existing, like that's just not how it is. But that Lo includes these pieces or like these glimpses of things like oh, like maybe it might be okay, like Lily's Aunt Judy, who agrees to take Lily with her away from Chinatown in San Francisco,
and Kath,
and away from Kath, which Lily is initially, rightly so, extremely upset about, because it's a way in which her agency is completely taken away from her by her parents. Like they just make her decision for her. But that Judy, despite, you know, not knowing everything, is open to understanding Lily and like asking her questions and like giving Lily a space to exist, I think is really important. And also that Lily's brothers don't immediately like cast her off either. So it's not that Lily's whole family has like blanket unified reaction. Like even her father has like a different reaction than her mother does, because he's just worried about Lily not being happy. I don't know.
I think it was a little bit more than that with her dad. It wasn't just her not being happy. I think there was also like the danger and like, this is just a phase. You'll get over it in time kind of a thing. I don't think he was engaging in a full way either. But
yeah, well, I guess I'm also thinking of like him bringing up another woman that he knew that he was pretty sure was gay. Like, so he didn't just like fully reject it. He was more thinking of like the ways that woman became isolated and like because of that and like lived alone like, for the rest of her life.
Don't want to be alone. And like it's so funny to make her dad a medical doctor because because the medical discourse around sexuality has changed a lot, right? So what we consider to be I believe it's not until 70s if the APA, American Psychological Association, decided to this is not like something that abnormal.
Mm-hmm.
So like the father, even though like Corinne said, like have seen like very established women but unhappy and being isolated in that condition. So I feel like he's being this confined of like he's like, oh, what can I offer as a doctor like in this situation? But also the one thing I remember a lot is like when she got on the train, it's a long train ride. I think the chapter ended on like, oh, the world start to open up for her. It's like, because previously like the spaces we have talked about, the Telegraph Club, Chinatown, family, like these space start to dissolve, right? So one thing I think like Lo is really trying to do to figure it out is how to secure the future for our queer youth, right? This like I actually, when I was reading the end, I was like, how the fuck she's gonna get out of this? How is this possible? So like I think Lo maybe also had that moment. I'm not trying to say anything, but like she tried hard to secure a certain possibilities for the future that is not like gonna be written on the walls.
So you mentioned the last line, and of course I looked it up because I was like, oh, you're absolutely right. But on page 386 in my version, Lily realized she had never been this far from San Francisco before, and a fleeting thrill went through her. This was the world, right? So, and that's before the 1 year later epilogue, but it is very much like opening up and showing her that there's more than these spaces that she's been in. But kind of something else that's really interesting is a conceit throughout the text is that Lo uses these timelines, right, to establish where we are in reference to other things that are happening historically. And then the last timeline that we see, Lily meets Kath on February 11th of 1956, right, when they meet again after 1 year of being apart. But then we also have in 1957 that Kath obtains her pilot license. And then in 1959, Lily graduates from the University of California, Los Angeles. Oh, she went to UCLA. And begins working at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So
that's the lab.
That's what it is.
There it is. So it's like we don't necessarily get narratively that their dreams are coming true, but the timeline that is still very much in the world and in the story building points towards these positive futures for Lily and Kath. And not even necessarily that they're together. It's not like Lily and Kath get married because the Supreme Court, it's more that though things were dark for them in this moment, they went on to achieve their dreams. So there is this kind of like turn towards the hopeful, right? That even though
it's queer futurity.
Boom.
Yeah.
Term drop.
Let's cruise a utopia together.
So is it fair to say that we collectively like the ending? ?
I do, yeah.
Kai is in thought.
I'm like, do I want to be more dramatic? But
more?
Like no. Like actually we get the story where they kind of reunite in a way that is not just hey, after 1 year, we got. It's more like there's the romance continue in a way that is more fulfilling to me. But and I realized, like this is just. It doesn't have to be, but like I'm happy with But I always said like I said in the last episode. Or an hour ago, is that like after reading that, I really just want to know more about Kath and Lily, like their romance kind of blossom in various ways. But I'm happy with how it ended. Yeah.
What about you, Ayani?
I think I'm happy with how it ended because I needed some hope, I guess, at the end, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'm glad that they reunited, because that was one of the things I think that was tough for me, is that Kath kind of was taken off the board because she got arrested, right, at the raid at the Telegraph Club, which we didn't spend a lot of time talking about, but we did mention. And we don't see her then for the rest of the novel until this epilogue. So I think I did, as a reader, need that little bit of Kath back, because I was like, they took one of the babies. I just need to know that she's going to be okay. So it was nice that they were able to come together, and we know that they were sending each other letters. So it's not that they were like completely out of communication. So yeah, it worked for me, though it makes me have another question that I want to ask you all. Where do you think Lily and Kath, like if we saw them as women in their 30s and their 40s and their 50s, because in their, let's see, they're 16 in the 1950s, so what, in their 50s that would be the 1990s, question mark? Am I doing that math correctly? Probably not. No.
So a quick note, we can also theorize it, but Malinda Lo has another book called A Scatter of Light that came out, I mean, a year or two ago, and I have not read it, but I have been reliably told that Kath and Lily do have a cameo in this book, and it's set in the present.
Ooh, well, I will say, if you get the new copy of Last Night at the Telegraph Club, there is an excerpt of Scatter of Light in the back. So I haven't read it.
Oh, so the Scatter of Light is set in the contemporary time?
Yeah, I think so.
Actually, it's set in 2013, which is not contemporary, but not. I mean, I will say, after the pandemic, like I feel
that
like
feels like
a
previous life.
Yeah,
yeah. It's a different parallel universe. It's Earth 4.0.
Yeah, right. We're in the 1610 universe or whatever. Yeah.
I think that was the present when Malinda Lo started writing it.
Yeah, novels take a while.
Yeah, that's true.
You're right. It does say here that there is a poignant note of closure for Lily and Kath. So you know what? We don't have to theorize. We'll just read the book, I guess. You know,
a poignant note of closure. I like that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Malinda Lo, you got us again. I don't know. I feel like this has been a really robust discussion of this book. I'm glad we got to talk about it. I'm personally very glad that I read it, but I guess throwing this back to y'all, are there any kind of last thoughts or feelings that you're having about the book that you want to kind of close us out on?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just really like and appreciate this book, and how much, actually, okay, I do have a coherent thought here.
Go for it.
When we read historical fiction, I think it is important to remember that it is not just commenting on the time in which it was set, it is commenting on the present in
absolutely.
which it is being written. And I think that's really apparent in the ways that Lo is thinking about intersectionality, identity, immigration, racism, censorship, and all of these things, which I think is part of why it has resonated with us so much as readers.
Yeah. And I just really appreciate this book is like has been keep giving, like in terms of sparking my interest. Like after reading this, I dive into like a couple other books about both historic kind of fiction and nonfiction narrative around queer life in America. And then like today's conversation really shed light on a lot of like the perspective I didn't think about. So like I just feel like this book is so rich, and it's so intentional in a beautiful way to tell a beautiful story. So thank you, Malinda Lo.
Yeah, intentional in a beautiful way, I think, should go on the cover of the next edition of this book. Well, you know what? Since we are a literature podcast, what are some of the other books that you read inspired by this? And I'll put them in the show notes. Yeah.
Okay. So immediately after reading this, because I was like, wait, I really don't know what Americans like society really feels lived like in the time period. So I started reading The Evening Crowd at Kermsers. It's about this dive bar that can become appropriated by a local gay community outside of St. Paul, Minnesota.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because it's an autobiographical account of Ricardo Brown's story, and it's very interesting in the ways that when we talk about queer life, including like last night at San Francisco, even though at Telegraph Club, even though like it's a very unique intersection of being like Chinatown is like right at the edge of like at the center of the story, but still it's focusing on a like major city in the United States.
Yeah.
So what is like queer life in like cities that are not a metropolis like in New York City, or that has been like the focus of queer urban geography. So this one is really cool. And I am currently reading The Body and Its Dangers, which is like the queer account of the AIDS epidemic that happened. So like, this book inspired me to read a lot more like the historical accounts of like lives that's beyond my own, or what I can conceive like in more like a mainstream media, right? Because I believe it's last year, there's another show came out called Fellow Travelers, talk about during it's 1950s, so like it actually overlaps with last night at the Telegraph Club, but at the height of McCarthyism, how gay federal agents or like government employees like navigate their sexuality and stuff like that. So like, yeah, there are just more and more stuff like this, and I think it is just like Corinne said, these narratives can have like really impact in the way we live and understand our current society more than just a history. It's a living memory.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
I also want to drop one quick recommendation, and this is a podcast episode that I normally assign to my students when I have them read this book.
Nice.
It is a special episode of NPR's Code Switch called They Don't Say Our Names Enough, and it came out in, I believe, the summer of 2020, but it is about the life of Stormy DeLavier, who was a famous male impersonator in like the mid-1900s and is also theoretically the first person to start conflict at Stonewall. So
yeah.
So that's a really interesting perspective if you want more information about male impersonators and like queer life in that time period.
Also, wow, attacks with the mid-1900s. Like, you didn't have to do that. You're around the undergrads too much. That was very rude.
I mean, at least I didn't say like the late 1900s to mean 1997.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Oh my God. I would cry. I would just immediately start bawling.
Like, I'd have to excuse
late
myself.
1900s.
It's like, I'm sorry, I cannot be here any longer. Good day. Oh, man. Well, on that note, this has been such a great discussion. Thank you so much for those text recommendations. Actually, you know what? I'll just throw this one in there. I know I mentioned it already, but My Favorite Thing Is Monsters is also kind of an exploration of queer youth in the 1960s, in 1960s Chicago. Yeah. The super quick premise is that there's a young girl named Karen who, for a lot of reasons, prefers to imagine herself as a monster, as a werewolf. So there's a lot of thinking about queerness, identity, monstrosity, race, murder, the Holocaust. Like, there's a lot happening. It's stunning. Oh, and it's all done in ballpoint pen on notebook paper. It's stunning. It's stunning. Part of the reason I love it is that it's one of those comics that breaks all the comics rules and is fantastic for doing it. So I'll throw that in the show notes as well. But yeah, no, this has been such a robust and fantastic conversation of last night at the Telegraph Club. Kai, thank you so much for joining us and being here.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's so much fun talking to you.
Oh, jeez.
Okay.
No. It's just, it's nice. We love having guests, but I think this in particular is just a really special set of 2 episodes. So thank you. Corinne, what do we have coming up for folks on future episodes of Sex, Love, Literature?
So we are going to gasp, read another book.
Oh my goodness.
We are finally going to talk about A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J.
boy.
Maas, and possibly also A Court of Mist and Starlight.
Mist and Fury, I think.
Mist and Fury, my bad. I don't know. They're all a court of something and something.
A court of sexy fairy sex. That's what it is.
Yeah. A court of sexy fairy time. We are finally going to talk about those.
Yeah, I just requested A Court of Mist and Fury from the library. So if that arrives in the next couple of days, I'll start tackling that.
I have been saying I will reread this book for a year, and now I actually have to do it.
You got to do it. You got to do it.
There you go. Yeah.
What else? Do we have anything else coming up on the docket that... Oh, we do have a forthcoming episode with Andrew Rigby from the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Teaching is a lot and being an academic is a lot. So when our schedules align, we'll definitely get that on the calendar because I'm excited to have that episode after actually meeting Andrew at the MLA convention in earlier this year, 2024.
You know what year it is.
I don't actually. I really don't know what year it is. In part because we work on the...
It's the late 1900s.
It's the late... Oh my God. Which was not 20 years ago at this point. Oh God. It's fine. I'm old. But yeah, and I'm sure we'll have some other exciting things coming down the pike for you SLL listeners. Corinne, while they're waiting for our episodes to go live, where can they find us?
As ever, you can find us on Instagram and Tumblr at Sex Love Lit Podcast, and you can also find us on our website at sexlovelitpodcast.com.
Excellent. And Kai, should the people be looking for you on the internet? Are there places they can find you?
No, you can find me on LinkedIn. Just type in Yukai Chen and search Yukai Chen, University of Florida, and you will find me right there.
I don't know why, but that in particular is hilarious to me. I think I have such a weird relationship with LinkedIn as like a social networking platform. So that was...
I don't use it, so like...
Oh my goodness. Well, excellent. This has been Sex Love Literature. As always, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.